Hi everyone. Today we're going to look at using an R Markdown to create an output that's a lot easier to read. So, we've worked in R scripts before, but Markdowns are a little more interactive. You see a little more of your output right where your code is, and in the end we can knit an HTML file that lets me see exactly what you guys are seeing, which can be really helpful now that we're remote and I'm going to have to debug your code. So, how do we get started? Let's do an example that involves your last homework. So, I go to Moodle, I look at the assignment, take this data, use the adjacency matrix information to make a network graph, use at least 2 of the attribute columns to change the color or shape of your graph, save the graph and hand it in with your R script, Well, we're going to make an R Markdown, which could have been prettier had you known at the time. So, first, I'll download my data. Then, I'm going to go to RStudio. Normally, you would go up here, you would go New File, R Script. But today, we're going to go New File, R Markdown. And it is going to pop up this menu for you. The default output format, we're going to stick with HTML. You don't need anything else on your computer for that to work, so it makes things easier. I'm going to title this Homework 3. Author, Tim Bellicarni. Now, this is going to make some code for you automatically, and it's going to make things a little bit easier. Okay, so in your script here, you see it already's created some text for you. Your title's right here, the author is right here, the date you did it is right here, and the output is HTML. You don't need to mess with that. We're also not going to mess with this. We can leave that right there. R automatically puts into your text when you start a Markdown some advice. It gives you some examples. We don't really need any of those things. In Markdown, it's essentially the opposite of when we're working in an R script. Rather than putting our notes to ourselves with those kind of put in special characters, we're instead going to put the code. And if we put the pound signs here, what they're going to do is tell the Markdown document that we should make this a big headline. So for each section, you might want to do that. Now, let's see. Let's make, the more of them you make, actually the smaller the headline. So let's start off and say, setting our working directory. Now, the thing to understand about Markdown is you have to do everything within Markdown. You can't have set your working directory in another place. You can't have opened up packages in another script. If it's not in your code, it won't work. So we need our code to be complete. It's actually something I like about Markdown. So we need to put some R code in. We can't just do it like this. If we do it like that, R will think that this is text. When we're working in an R script, we have to put a code chunk. So we go up here to insert, click on it, R, and it's going to tell us between these tags is where we're going to put our code. But I want to demonstrate something that's going to help us out a lot. We're going to put options here. And the option that's most important for us is error equals true. What that's going to do is if you're running your code and trying to knit and it says it doesn't work, normally it just gives an error and doesn't knit you an output. If you add error equals true here, then it's going to knit and it's going to show you the error in the file. And that's really, really helpful for me if you send me these files so I can see exactly what your code's doing. So now it's going to set our working directory. Normally we set our working directories by going over here. Maybe I will go to my analysis class, homework, something. So I go over here, I find where I've saved my data. I imagine you have a lot less files. This is where I find homework3data.csv. I go to more. I set my working directory. But here is the even more important thing than normal. I need to put it in this chunk. It needs to be able to be run at the beginning. So I've set my working directory. What do I want to do next? I should import my data. So again, if you want to, you can go over here. You can import your data set, like many of you do. I'm going to call it HW. Let's call it DT3. I'm going to take my code. I'm going to just copy it. And I'm going to put it inside a new chunk. Now, you can run these individually. Click these little green buttons. It runs them. Let's check our environment. Oh, look at that. There's our homework 3 data. It fills everything in. We get this message. So, now we've imported our data. What did it want me to do? Well, one thing I just like to do is go get my directions, copy them, and put them in my R script. Let's put them at the top. Directions. Now, this won't bother R. This is just going to take it as regular text. So hopefully this is an adjacency matrix. I'm going to take a look. Let's see. It's 15 by 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that looks right. If we take out those first 4 columns, it'll be 15 by 15. And I'm going to create it. So, what am I going to do? Making square matrix. Lots of ways I could do this. So, I could do this in 1 step or 2. Let's do it in 2 to make things easier. Call this our squared data frame. And what do we need? We need not the first 4 columns, so we could just do DT3. And I'm going to subdivide that by take all the rows and columns 4 through 19. Run it. We're looking good. Wait, no we're not. That's not square. Not 4 through 19. I want to take out the first 4. I know it's not square because it's 15 observations by 16 variables. It should be 15 by 15. It should be 5 by 19 if I want to take out the first 4 columns. Run it. 15 by 15. We're looking good. Now, I'm going to make it a matrix. Within the codes, you can say what you're doing if you want. Making square. Making into a matrix. So, how do we do that? We're just going to tell it it's a matrix. And we should be good. Run our chunk. Let's see if we have a new object here. We do. It's 1 by 15, 1 by 15. Zeros and ones. That's what we like for our adjacency matrix. Now we're going to make our graph. But to do that, we have to call a package. What package do we use for graphs? Oh, what did I do wrong? I didn't put it in the R tags, so it wouldn't have worked. I'll cut that. Now we can make our graph. Graph dot adjacency math s mode equals we'll say it's directed and run it. Okay, we have G1, our graph, and you might want to even plot it right away. This is one of the cool things about RStudio, is that, and working particularly within an R Markdown, you get to see the plots right in here. And as you go down, it stays in your script, so you can go back and look at it. It makes it less efficient for looking at scripts, but it makes it a lot nicer when you are analyzing things in some places. So there I am, and there I have my first graph created. So now that we've created our first graph, we need to change something about it. We need to use something, colors, shapes, whatever, to indicate a characteristic for the individuals. So let's see, in our original data frame, it's not it, we had sex, whether or not they're a mean girl's love interest, and whether they're a biblical prophet. It has been noted by members of the class that there are some errors in my classification of mean girl's love interest and biblical prophets, so I think we should probably go with sex in this one. So, what do we have to do? First, we have to make sure we attach these attributes. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to create a new section where I'm attaching attributes. I add my R code. I then create a line where I look at what attributes the graph has already. I run it. Okay, right now there's only name. I need to add to that. So, since I'm working with a adjacency matrix, as long as things were in order at the beginning, I didn't change anything up, I can automatically just attach the attribute from the adjacency matrix. But it never hurts to be sure, so how am I going to do that? Well, I am going to sum the cases for which the G1 name is not equal to DT3 X1. It filled in X1 for us because it didn't have a column header. So I'm going to sum it. We see it's 0. That means no times does it find the situation in which this name doesn't match it in this column. So we know we're good to add attributes. So how do we do that? Well, pretty simply. We're just going to go a vertex attribute for G1. We're going to call it something. Let's call it sex, because that's what we called it in the other variable, just to keep, or the other data frame, just to keep it simple. And we're going to attach DT3 sex. At the end of that, let's look at our vertex attributes again. Hopefully, if this works, we should see 2 now. Run the whole chunk. There we go. Now, we have 2 attributes in our last chunk, in our last vertex attributes call. Now, I need to make something conditional in our graph. So, how are we going to do that? Let's go down here. Graph characteristics in plot conditionally. Add a code chunk. And let's change the color. We've talked about before that if you add color to your graph, as an attribute to your graph, it's going to automatically change. So G1, let's set a base color and just make it orange. Does orange work as a color in this? I don't know, I never remember. graph again. There we go, it's orange. Was it orange already? Maybe. So let's do yellow. There we go. Now we need to do our conditional. So for the vertices of G1, so for G1 color, for those vertices where sex equals, what were they before? M and F. So let's do F. For those, we're going to change that to red. And let's plot it again to see what works. It did not. Let's see, what could have gone wrong here? We created our graph called sex. We said where it's equal to, oh, but see, look at this. It thinks that these are characters, and this it thinks is the F that we use for false. So I need to put that in parentheses. Sorry, quotation marks. So we run it again. Aha. Let's make our arrows a little bit smaller. Run it again. There we go. So we're looking good. Now, let's imagine this is the end. I ask you to do 2 for the homework. We'll only do 1 here. We say, okay, I'm done. I want to create a nice document for Tim to look at. You go up to here and click knit. It's going to pop up this the first time you do it. Wherever you've set your working directory, that's where you're going to be. I'm going to do homework 3 Tim's version. And now I'm going to save it. And it's going to work a little bit, and it's going to pop up this HTML document. Notice that all the outputs are right after the commands, at least after the code chunks. So the great thing is that lets me see exactly what you're seeing. So let's go back here and imagine I messed up something. Hard to believe, I know. But let's go and say I put a comma after this. I knit it. Oh man, it gives me an error. Error in G. But notice what it didn't do was create the HTML document. So what do? We saw it earlier. Error equals true. So now I can knit it again. And now instead of not working, it does it, but it prints it out and gives me the error that you see on your screen. And that really helps me when I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with your code. So wherever you save that, in my case it was homework 3.3, I can go over here and I have an HTML version. Opens up in a web browser. And what you want to do is send me that. What you don't want to do is send me this .rmd. This is the file that you used to create it. You could send me that too, but that's not going to help me because all the files aren't on the same places on my computer that they are on yours. So you want to send me the HTML. That's what's helpful. Remember, keys to this. Make sure every step is in the code. So if it's not going to work. If you did it interactively but didn't put it in the actual code, you're in trouble. That's the biggest thing to making sure that these work. So that's a quick introduction to creating these type of documents. I think they'll help us a lot in terms of working remotely, and they're just a lot prettier for me to look at. So you're going to hand one of these in with your first analytic report. Good luck.